Hi, this is Carey Martell, founder of Power Palace Gym. And in this video, I just want to talk a little bit about why I decided to start this gym. So there's a short reason, and then there's a much longer reason. I want to first give you the short reason for those who don't want to watch the lengthier explanation. Short answer, it's pretty simple, right? So Newberg, my hometown here, Newberg, Oregon, always, as long as I can remember, had a gym for serious strength athletes, right? There's a gym for bodybuilding, there's a gym for powerlifting, sports conditioning, always had that here in Newberg. And when I finally returned home, I was living in LA at the time, and during COVID, I ended up coming back to my hometown like many people did. And I saw there wasn't a gym in town that you could do that at, right? There's Planet Fitness, which is Planet Fitness, right? They have Smith machines and, you know, maybe a quarter of the weight that they need to have. It's just not a place for serious workouts. And then there's the pool gym, which is very small, doesn't have a whole lot of equipment, and not a lot of people can use it because there isn't that much equipment. And more importantly, they're missing important types of equipment for doing a good programming. So if you want to be a power lifter, they're missing stuff for powerlifting. You can't deadlift there, right? If you want to get into Olympic lifting, you can't do that either. Bodybuilding, they're missing a lot of stuff. They don't even have a full dumbbell set, right? So I wanted to create a gym here in Newberg so that people that are doing, you know, this stuff can go do it again. And you don't have to be like a serious competitive athlete. I do a lot of bodybuilding exercises, but I have no intentions of being a competitive bodybuilder, right? I just want to get myself back into shape. So I think that's the average person. The average person isn't necessarily looking to be a competitor. They just enjoy doing a certain type of strength exercise for their fitness goals. So that's the short reason, right? There was nothing here, so I decided to start one. Longer reason, right? You can take a good look at me and you can see that I'm overweight. There's a story behind that, right? So when I was 17, I joined the Army. I was in the Army for a number of years, and I was very, very physically active. I originally joined the Army as a motor transport operator, which is a fancy term for a truck driver. But I fairly quickly, I think within a year actually, I reclassified my MOS. I went through to new MOS training. MOS standing for Military Occupational Specialty. Okay, job, basically what it is. It's a fancy term for job. And I reclassified as an infantryman. So I was in infantry units and doing that training. And I loved doing that training. That's really what I obviously should have been doing in the military. So I had a tremendous amount of training. I was trained in everything. You know, you train in riot training, you get trained in urban warfare, you get trained in all types of stuff, right? And it's a very physically demanding job. And I really excelled at that, even though I'm a shorter guy. I got really strong. And I used to, you know, do the push-ups on my fingers while having somebody on my back. I was really strong. So when I was deployed, at the tail end of my first deployment during Operation Iraqi Freedom, I was attached to a unit that wasn't an infantry unit, oddly enough. The Army had a shortage of people who were truck drivers because a lot of the guys were getting shot. Let's just be honest, what was happening, right? They were getting ambushed on convoy routes, and I got attached to a transport unit that did armored transports and various other things as well. So we go around to different camps and deliver stuff. So I ended up, you know, being really frustrated with that, and I turned more and more heavily toward weightlifting with my free time, because a lot of the camps they had really, you know, not amazing facilities for weight training, but you could do, you know, almost anything there. So I was really getting into shape. I was getting into, you know, I'd say the best shape of my life, actually, while I was deployed, of all things, because I was on this mission that was not combat direct, you know, and I just had free time in the evening. So I was planning to go Special Forces. I had met the minimum standard of physical, the PT score basically. I had 100 all the way across, and I was gonna, you know, I had qualified to do Special Forces training, apply for it anyway, right? The bare minimum, which is get, you know, I think you needed to have 100% in all your scores for push-ups, sit-ups, and your run. And I had that by the end of my deployment. So I was going to apply for Special Forces. I had the endorsement of the lieutenant in my unit. The platoon unit was all endorsed me. So problem with that is I had my second shot of the anthrax vaccine. And not a lot of people remember that there was this whole scare about anthrax shortly after the Twin Towers attack. There was somebody had put parts of anthrax powder into envelopes and mailed it around to all these politicians and just scared the bejesus out of the entire country. So the Army stockpiled like large amounts of the anthrax vaccine, and they were administering it to soldiers. The problem is a very small percentage of soldiers had severe allergic reactions to that vaccine, and unfortunately I was one of them. And it completely ended my career. When I got out, I could barely walk, and not because my muscles didn't work, but because every time my heart rate increased, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. Like my muscles in my chest and other parts of my body would all tighten up. And it would often happen right after I had taken a breath. So I wouldn't be able to breathe. And sometimes I would pass out. And it was the most frustrating part of my life, because I went from being this top-of-line soldier, had the blessing for the unit, my lieutenant and the sergeant. They said, yeah, Carey, you should go to Special Forces training. I met the PT score the minimum requirements for it. And now look at me, right? I barely could walk upstairs without feeling like I was going to die. So I got medically discharged, honorable discharge in 2005. And I basically, went back home. And I was living with my mother and my stepfather for a short time. And I basically, very quickly into that, I got so frustrated that I basically said, F this. Like, I'm either going to overcome it or I'm going to die. It's going to be one or the other. I'm not going to live like an invalid. So what I used to do is in the mornings, I used to walk down past where my mom was living to a little area that was kind of flat, a little sidewalk area. And I would just force myself to sprint. Almost immediately, my muscles in my chest would just lock up on me. And I would, just fall to the ground in pain. I couldn't breathe. And it's it's a really scary experience, actually. Feeling like, maybe I'm going to suffocate and die here. And I would focus really deeply on breathing exercises while I was going through that. Now, when I was a teenager, I was somewhat athletic, and I was on the football team, but I also started taking Taekwondo lessons. I got really heavily into the martial arts, and I would learn what was called Qigong techniques, Gugan techniques. Some people refer to it as Qigong. It's special breathing exercises. It's supposed to develop your Qi, but really what it is, it helps you establish a very powerful mind and body connection. So you can focus on certain parts of your body, like flexing certain muscles and preparing the body for physically demanding exercise and things like that. You learn how to control hyperarousal. Some people know it as fight or flight. And of course, while I was a soldier, you also learn some of this stuff as well. You learn how to breathe so you don't fall into tunnel vision, okay? You learn how to control that heightened awareness, that combat-ready state. So while I was sprinting, I would focus on my breathing. I would imagine that I was like sending electricity like through circuits in my nervous system. I would imagine my nervous system is electrical circuits basically, and I would think about, while I'm breathing, pushing out my muscles, like regaining control over the muscles in my chest when they would lock up. I would focus hard on that. I wouldn't be able to breathe while I was doing it. I was trying to breathe, right? I was focusing. So I would do that constantly. I did that for a couple months. And one day when I was, doing the sprint, and I would very quickly, have this lock up on me, I felt it lock up, and I was still on my feet, and I was still running, as I would. until I could no longer, and I would fall on the ground. But this time, instead of getting to the point that I felt like I had no oxygen and I couldn't run anymore, and I would fall, instead, I felt my muscles release that tension, that locking up, that freezing up in my chest. It released, and I was able to continue sprinting. And I couldn't sprint that much longer, right? It was very hard because my chest wanted to lock up again. But that one time that it released, that's when I knew I could get better. That's when I knew I could overcome this. So first couple of years I got out in the Army in 2005, and I spent the next few years really focusing on these breathing exercises, maintaining them as long as I could, often while I was doing something else. I'd be at work as a night security guard. I'd focus on my breathing, right? I'd do this sort of semi-meditative state I was in, trying to create new neural pathways in my brain to communicate to my muscles so that when I had, this type of panic attack, this whatever you want to call it, right, that was causing me to not be able to be a physically active person, I'd focus on that, and I would just make it happen. That's all I can say. It's like I would just keep trying and trying and trying to have 100% control over my body, just like I had prior to that vaccine reaction. And it took me a lot of years to be able to do it. I still remember there's sometimes I would be driving down my car and it would randomly happen. I would have, my chest lock up on me. But by that time, I had already learned how to put myself in this meditative, very hyper-focused state and use my breathing to focus on my muscles in my chest and make them expand anyway, my willpower, right? So I was already learning how to overcome this thing. And I think it took me a long time, actually. I'm 39 years old now. And I honestly, I think the last time I had one of those little attacks on my chest where I felt like I couldn't breathe, it's probably been a good 5 years now. So I overcame that. But there's other consequences, with that as well, right? Like I have irritable bowels now. I'm allergic to a bunch of stuff now. I can't drink caffeine as a result. I can't take aspirins and things like that. There's certain medications I can't take because my body will freak the hell out if I take them. So it's been challenging, but not impossible to go past it. And compared to a lot of people, have had disabilities from the military, I'm not so bad. I was able to overcome this. It just took a lot of years. It took over a decade of my life. But now I'm in a great position financially, and I'm in a great position mentally, and just the time I have in my life to be able to start new businesses. So I have a bunch of different ventures I've started over the years. When I was living in Los Angeles, I was working in entertainment, particularly in digital media, video streaming technologies, and I wanted to be able to lift weights. So I would go out to the gyms in Los Angeles where I was living, and places I would visit, things like that. And I watch a lot of stuff on the internet, read a lot of stuff about physical fitness, and I started doing that when I was very young, and just kind of continued on it throughout my life. And of course, when YouTube came out, there's so much information now about fitness, it's nuts. So I just acquired over a period of time a bunch of information about physical health from my personal experiences in the martial arts, in the military as a soldier. You get a lot of information really as a soldier, especially in infantry units, about physical exercise and the types of things that you do. In that training is just kind of bonkers. I'll talk a little bit about that here shortly, but other information like stuff on YouTube. I know a lot of information about a lot of different physical conditioning and so on, which I learned partly because of a personal interest and partly because I thought maybe it would help me learn how to overcome whatever it was that was causing these problems after I took that vaccine. So I was successful with that. I'm very good at establishing a very strong mind connection with my muscles, being able to isolate those muscles, focus on those muscles because of this experience that I went through. And I probably could teach that to other people too, I think. Anyway, military, right? Military experience. It's a very different kind of physical activity than something like bodybuilding, although there are people in the military that very much enjoy bodybuilding, do a lot of exercises. I've learned things like that over the years from people. Martial arts especially, martial arts, I have certification, or I had certification in the Army as an instructor for hand-to-hand combat for my platoon. And tons of training and just learning how to march on, march all freaking night to graduate from basic training. That's something that everybody goes through, and that's something you continually reinforce through infantry training. You go on your drills and stuff like that out in the field exercises. And being a shorter guy, I have to try to keep up with people that are bigger than me. For every step that a very tall person took in, while we're on in the field on the trails and stuff, every one step they take, I take at least 3 steps, right? Because I got much shorter legs, so I had to always be forcing myself to keep up with other people on these long marches. And it's just part of, it just became part of my identity. And then of course when I got out and I tried to overcome what had happened to me, and once I was able to start being able to do things like run for a long period of time, and then whenever I would have that happen, try to lock up in my chest, I would just sort of stop running, focus on my breathing, get myself back under control, and then continue running again. And do that a lot. And I started increasing the difficulty. I started wearing a weighted vest, 50 pound to 100 pounds weighted vests. I would jog with those. I would try to find mountains so I could jog up the mountains and stuff. And I would just increase the challenge on my cardiovascular system so that would become more demanding, so that when I would have these little attacks trigger, I would have to be forced to overcome them, or I'm out in the middle of nowhere by myself with just myself, a hot ass sun, a mountain trail, and a thing of water, and it's do or do not. You have to overcome it. So I got really into this position where, like, if it's not challenging, I get super bored with it, which is how I got fat again coming back to Newberg, right? There's nothing challenging for me to really do around here, at least challenging in the way that I wanted to do the exercises. I could run around with a weighted vest and all that, but by this point I was already lifting weights and really putting a lot of pressure on the cardiovascular system through lifting heavy weights. I was getting into doing the bodybuilding stuff again, exercises. And I was looking pretty sharp, and I just couldn't do that again since I came back to Newberg. So I asked the previous owner of the gym, Excel here. I met with him. I said, "Hey, are you gonna start our gym?" He said, "No." So I said, "Well, is it okay if I start a gym?" He said, "Sure, go for it." So I started acquiring pieces of equipment, and I wanted to create a very particular type of gym, right? I knew that I needed to have some sort of theme, something novel, something that would be fun and have universal appeal. And my favorite period of the decade, honestly, is the 80s. Probably a little bit biased because I grew up in the 80s. But it's become super popular now with television programs, and movies and stuff like that. And there's definitely, I think there's a strong demand to kind of harken back to that era of American history. So I said, that's great, because I think that period of history for fitness is probably one of the best, because you had so many people that were interested in so many different types of physical exercises. You had the development of a lot of really great training methods. Bodybuilding really peaked in the 80s, I think, in terms of the excitement that was around it, number of people that were doing it, not even to be competitive, but just to look good. It dropped in interest for a while, but now it's coming back due to influencers on social media and stuff like that. So it's a perfect time for this. You have aerobics developed during the 80s, right? And lots of other different, they had martial art craze in the 80s. So there's a lot of things you can do with that that I think powerlifting too is very much 80s. So 80s is like a perfect period to focus on, I think, for a gym, because you have all these different things that got super popular within physical culture in the 80s. And back then there was this strong emphasis on like to eat healthier, to really focus on excellence in your training. Now, there's definitely people out there that were using steroids and stuff, like everybody knows that now, but there was a lot of heavy, like, don't use steroid messaging that happened in the 80s and early 90s as well. So I like that period. I'm a natural person. I don't use performance enhancing anything. Okay, I use supplements like protein powder and creatine. That's about it. Like I said before, I don't even drink caffeine because I can't drink caffeine. But caffeine's not that great for you anyway. But I'm digressing here. It's a longer explanation. Short as that, I thought 80s would be a cool period, and we could do some fun things with the branding and just create a fun training environment. And really, I think that's what it has to be for people to stick with exercise program, is that it has to be fun for them. And for a lot of people, that means it does have to have a demand. It has to have like that right level of intensity. It has to be an intensity that they can control themselves, which is one of the things I like about bodybuilding, is that you can fully exhaust yourself doing a certain particular exercise. Then you give yourself a little bit of a rest, and then you look around and you see, what other thing am I going to challenge myself on now? Gyms are just full of stations to challenge yourself on in different ways. And I think that's a very fun thing for a lot of different people. And then powerlifting, use a lot of same equipment as bodybuilders anyway, right? Sports conditioning uses a lot of the same equipment as bodybuilders. You're still using cable crossovers. You're still using bench presses and squat racks and dumbbells, kettlebells. You have cardio equipment for the bikes and the treadmills. You have boxing bags for cardio, right? It's all the same equipment. It's just how you exercise using that equipment that determines what your exercise programming is. So you could do a lot of different things sports-wise. You could train for a lot of different sports, even with the same equipment, if you build yourself a bodybuilding gym. So that's what I settled on making it. If you can do bodybuilding here, you could do damn near anything here, okay? In terms of physical conditioning and exercise. So it'll work for everybody. I'm a big believer in that. And I look forward to, now that I have a physical place where I'm at all the time, I can focus on my own training. I can do it just the way that I want. I'll go to a lot of the gyms and they'll be missing things that I want to train. So, as an example, I like to train my neck. I train my neck because I got shoulder injuries from my time in the Army, and I want to strengthen my shoulders. I want to strengthen my neck. I do martial arts. I like to do historical swordsmanship, which is becoming a big sport right now. It's a full contact sport where you use swords, not real swords. They're not sharp swords. They're trainers. They're blunt, and they thrust. They bend and thrust. So, but when you get hit in the head, of course, that takes a lot of force through your neck. So by strengthening your neck, you greatly reduce the chance of concussions. So I will always train my neck. I have always tried to train my neck whenever I work out. So I have, not the greatest developed neck right now, but I used to have, I used to look a little bit yoked. And I want to get back to that, where I go out to a barber and somebody says, oh yeah, man, like, what do you do for a living? Because your neck is crazy. So I want to get back to that, right? And it's really hard to work your neck if you don't have a neck weight machine, because you got to try to balance the plates on your head. So you got to hold them with your biceps after you already did an upper arm workout. Maybe you've got to hold a harness on your head and balance your stomach over a bench. It's not the best way to train the neck and focus purely on the neck. And I came into this gym this one time that had a 4-way neck machine, and I fell in love with it. I loved it, but most gyms don't have them. So when I created this gym, I was like, I didn't need to have a certain piece of equipment. A 4-way neck machine, one of these old school Nautilus pullover machines to isolate the lats. I want to have certain attachments for the cable crossover, ankle weights, the rope attachments. And these things are actually kind of common, but you'd be surprised how many gyms I've been to in the past don't have that stuff, And I want to have the benches, so you have incline and the decline benches. You often see incline benches at gyms these days. You really rarely see the incline benches. Incline is really important if you're trying to get the focus on the lower chest, because a lot of people end up neglecting their lower chest. And even right now, as I get back into swing of things, I'm not really focusing that much on my lower chest, but I will once I get back in the swing of things, and I go back to like what I was doing before. I've talked a lot here, but just sort of give you an idea of my background, my experiences, and I want to say, about Army training, because I didn't want to talk about that a little bit. 10th Mountain is an amazing, it's a crazy base, right? So 10th Mountain has a huge reputation for producing extremely strong and indomitable soldiers, and I think part of that isn't just the culture of fitness around there, but like the goddamn environment. So if you don't know what Fort Drum, New York is, it's like one of the coldest damn places within the United States. It gets colder there than in frickin' Alaska, okay? I'm not joking. The Alaska National Guard, when they do their cold weather training, they go to Fort Drum, New York, which is where 10th Mountain is. And 10th Mountain, the unit was specifically originally created just for mountain fighting in Europe. And they have a lot of emphasis on the ski stuff. I never did the ski stuff, okay? I'm not even sure if they still do that, to be honest. But what I did do is every freaking morning during the winter, which is pretty long there, and you go outside early in the morning at like 6 a.m. I think is what I would have to be out in formation like 6 in the morning, and you're so cold your nose hairs freeze, like your eyebrows will freeze, your nose hairs freeze. It is freaking cold, okay? And you go out there and you're wearing your PT uniform. I don't know what the hell we're wearing now, but it was the more modern one where we had, the pants and we had our swim shorts underneath basically. And we have our sneakers on in the snow where it's freezing, and just regular sneaker, because it's a uniform, right? So you can't wear like cold weather socks when you go outside. You have to wear just normal tennis shoe socks. And yeah, we do have our gloves on. We have glove liners and wool glove liners and leather gloves. And we have like a little beanie cap on to protect your ears, the top of your head. And otherwise, we're just going out there in a regular PT uniform. And we're in the snow, and the snow, snow's like up to here. So you go down there and you're doing push-ups in the snow. You're doing your jumping jacks, on some ice. You go and do your run, after all of that. You do your run on this icy-ass roads in the morning. It's still dark. The sun's not even up yet. It's cold as shit. Your nose hairs are freezing. You can't breathe out of your nose. You gotta breathe purely out of your mouth the whole time. And everywhere you go, you're just seeing clouds of steam coming out of everybody's mouths. And it's bonkers. It's some bonkers stuff. And I hated every freaking minute of it that I did it. But I did it while I was there. And but it's crazy physically demanding, I want to say. I got used to it, but it is not the most fun thing to do. And then, of course, you go on field exercise or something, and it's cold as shit everywhere. Fort Drum's a hard place. It's a hard place. And it produces pretty hard people. I want to say that. And then it's the opposite, right? You get deployed to one of the hottest freaking places in the world, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, you go crazy places. And in my case, I didn't go to Afghanistan, but I did go to Iraq. It's hot as hell there, right? It's over 100 degrees every single day. I think at some points it got over 110 degrees, okay? And you still have to be out there on your missions, still have to do what you're doing. You're still required to do physical training, exercises, running in 100 plus degree weather. Every morning for PT, doing your push-ups in that sandy ass freaking sweat box. This is a crazy thing that we did. And all soldiers do that stuff. And I don't think a lot of people always think about that. Like, some people are older and they used to be in the military, but they don't look in shape anymore. Man, you have no idea what that person probably went through at one point in their life and what type of information they can impart to you from what they went through. I know why a lot of soldiers, they get out, they get lazy as shit. You get lazy as shit because of what you were doing when you were in the military. It's a tough life, especially if you're in combat. So I get it. There's a lot of people coming in now who are prior military, some veterans. We got veteran discounts. want to help a lot of guys, stay in shape, get back into it, work it out. Because, especially with people who have been soldiers and had that high level of fitness all the time, if you don't work out, your body just wants to start storing your energy in fat. You get fat. I honestly believe soldiers, because of lifestyle, like it changes your body to want to constantly try to store energy in case of an emergency. So I think soldiers get fatter a lot easier than people who aren't soldiers because of how physically demanding the lifestyle is to be a soldier. So anyway, it's kind of a longer video that I wanted to make, but I think I put out a lot of information about my background, my reasons for starting this gym. Maybe some of that's going to resonate with some people. Maybe it'll be helpful. Hope it was at least informative. See you in the next video.